That's right. I'm back. One of the things that I get asked all the time is, do you need to go to school in order to get into this field? And the short answer is no. You don't need to go to school. Thanks for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate the views, the likes, the subscribe. I never have to do YouTube again after this. That was it. That was the one question that I had to answer, and now I'm just done. I can go away forever. But to go along with that very short answer, I'm also going to just take this time to make a video where I'm just going to talk about how I got into the industry. I personally did not go to any art school. I'm kind of what you'd consider self-taught, I suppose. It's kind of weird to phrase it like that because I did learn from a lot of different people, but I never had any sort of traditional academic schooling. I didn't go to any sort of art school. And so I thought it might, be beneficial for some people that are maybe thinking about going into art school or getting into this industry to hear a story from someone that, I don't know, didn't have to experience that. It's not just going to be a whole talking head video though. I'm going to actually pop on over to my computer and I'm going to go through a bunch of my old art files from the years that I was getting better, because I have pretty much all the art that I did at that time. So you can actually see like how I progressed and what I was learning and what I was working on to get to that point where I could start working in the industry. Before I get into that, I just wanted to quickly say thank you to everyone that went and watched and liked and subscribed from my League of Legends process video. And not only thank you for everyone that went and watched that video, but also everyone that went over to check out the other channel that I do with my friend Gavin called Distraction Makers. Distraction Makers is a channel where me and my buddy Gavin talk about game design in just kind of a relaxed, we're hanging out, talking about game design way. I don't know how to fucking sell that. Anyways, let's just get to the rest of the video. And through what can only be described as movie magic, we're at my desk. Wow, whoa, ah. So I keep all of the files that I've ever made up to 2010. I don't have 2017s. I lost those when my computer ended up dying on me at some point. But other than that, I have all the work that I've ever done. I'm not going to be going through every single thing. That would be insane. But I'm just going to be kind of showing pieces that I was working on and kind of talking about how I started and, how I ended up moving into the industry. Technically this is a little misleading because the first folder I have is 2010. I actually started digitally painting and practicing anatomy in 2008, so that started in 2008, and now this is everything from 2010. So let's get into it. There's no particular order to some of these things. I didn't start actually creating things in any sort of order to start. So you can see here, I know nothing about anatomy whatsoever. I remember making this, and I made this as one night because I was like, I know anatomy. I know anatomy. And so I started painting this thing from imagination, and I realized after a while, I was like, I don't know anatomy. I have like no idea what's happening in here, or there's like a bone here, I think. I had no idea what I was doing. I did a lot of portrait practice. This is Andy Samberg with a melty face. And this was just like me trying to get better at digital painting. That's what a lot of these are. This like just sketching of a dog, but looking through a lot of these drawings and a lot of these paintings, I really was pretty directionless. I didn't really have a good idea of what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. And I knew at that point in time, I said I wanted to be a creature concept artist for Blizzard. And so you can actually kind of see some of that like inspiration here, where like I'm not really looking at creature anatomy, but I just kind of had ideas for like fun creatures and stuff. But most of the time I was just kind of copying stuff. I didn't really know, I wasn't really paying attention to what I was copying. I was mostly just sort of drawing and hoping that I was going to get better somehow. This is part of a conceptart.org competition. This was the creature of the week. They would have weekly competitions. Obviously I did not win. Yeah, it's a lot of drawing from anatomy books and just kind of smoothly shading things for some reason. I think I just really liked making something look like clean, and I didn't really know anything about color and light at this point. I just kind of was like smoothly shading with, pencil because I just liked the look of it. And what ended up happening is I was able to eventually get to a point that I could draw anatomy and draw it like okay. the problem is that it was all the same anatomy. And so you'd see, like, I had a character like this, and I'm drawing this, and like the anatomy is not great, but it's because I'm trying to recreate what I think I've seen from these books, but not actually understanding what I was copying from those books in the first place. So I'm not thinking about, pectoral muscles that connecting into a deltoid, going into a bicep or anything like that. Yeah, lots of super muscly shirtless dudes, which is the other problem, is that I would draw so much from imagination. That's the other problem. I would study so much from these books and draw so many like figures and copy things from Bridgman and Hogarth and stuff. This is when I started working on Loomis things. The problem is, like, whenever I tried doing something from imagination, I just had no idea what to do. Like, I very quickly kind of lost any ideas of what was cool or interesting, because I was so invested in the pursuit of getting better that I wasn't really thinking of, I never really had like an OC that I kept drawing or something, right? I wasn't really obsessed with like drawing any particular sort of character or creatures or coming up with my own ideas. Like, I always wanted to, that was always the goal. But in that pursuit of trying to get better, I just ended up losing a lot of that like creativity, I feel like. And you can see such a drastic difference between the studies that I'm doing versus the actual like drawings that I'm doing from imagination here. Yeah, this was like this thing I tried priding myself in, of like not doing it by reference, which isn't a bad thing either. I think it's okay to set up a goal of trying to draw from reference and then recreate something from reference. But you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. I was setting myself up for failure. I think anyone is, when you're just kind of drawing something but not really thinking about what you're drawing. So even though I'm drawing this thing from imagination, I don't actually know like any of the muscles in the forearm. I don't actually know the bicep muscle and like how that interlocks and where that's placed and how it, contracts. And it's why I have like the tricep muscle is like flexed, even though in this position it wouldn't be, which isn't a bad thing. I think when people start out, what I always give people advice on is, when you're starting, if you're in the first year, maybe even 2 years of getting into this, don't necessarily worry about thinking so much. Get more into the habit of just drawing as much as possible, because that's such a huge hurdle. I remember seeing this piece and thinking this was so good. I remember thinking this is like the greatest thing I've ever made. And like, it probably was at the time, but mostly it's just that like, I think I lucked into how some of the shading ended up panning out. It ended up being like rendered in a pretty clean way. So 2011, I would have been a junior, going into a senior in high school. And it's a lot of the same thing that I was working on, really. Obviously, like, I'm improving in a way, like my memory, like I'm able to remember how certain things look. So you can see that in some of my character drawings, like some of the poses are a little bit better. Some of the anatomy is like looking a little bit better, but really it's just me trying to be fancy with shading and stuff. Otherwise, like, I still don't understand what I'm doing. And this is what I mean, is like, I could do something like this where I'm drawing something from reference and it's like pretty well done. It's really clean, but it's not really understanding like what's happening. Like, how could I recreate that? I remember this is when I joined the Crimson Daggers forum, if I'm not mistaken. And for those that don't know, Crimson Daggers is a forum that was started by Dave Raposa and Dan Warren. It was kind of like conceptart.org, but there's more of this kind of, not like an angst, but there is more of this like this feeling of like, yeah, we're gonna work really, really hard. Like, we really want to achieve this goal, and we're gonna do everything in our power to help each other to get there faster. I remember liking this guy. I thought this guy was cool. Started participating in more online contests and stuff. So this was Imagine FX. They had a forum at one point, and they would do like a weekly or bi-weekly like art challenge thing. And I remember I started participating in that. I mean, really, I was trying to participate in anything that I could, if it was on art.org or Crimson Daggers or wherever. This is now getting into 2012, and 2012 is when things started to shift. I was graduating high school, or getting ready to graduate high school, and I started having to kind of have talks with my parents at that time about what school was going to be like. In 2011, because I was part of Crimson Daggers, I started following a lot of people that didn't really go the school route. And so I kind of started telling my parents, like, I don't think I want to go to school. I don't think I need to go to school. And my parents were not really down for that. They were very, very skeptical. And they kind of insisted that I at least go and check out a school. And so we actually went to a school called PNCA, Pacific Northwest College of the Arts. I did a portfolio review day with them. And I remember showing my portfolio, which at this point in this year, I had quite a few things. I showed it to the head of illustration, and the head of illustration was looking through, kind of sifting through all the things in my portfolio. And after a little while of looking, he was like, "What medium are these?" I told him, like, "Oh, these are digital." And he looked at me like, "What? What do you mean they're digital?" And I said, like, "Oh, like they're like digitally painted, like with a tablet." And he's like, I've never heard of that." And I remember looking up at my mom, and my mom looked at me and she was like, "Oh," like, that's not good. So I don't know if that was a moment that, my mom was like, "Oh, okay, maybe this isn't the case. Maybe you don't need to go to school." But either way, I kind of told her, I ended up making a plan. The initial plan that I kind of ended up making with my parents was that if I can't make money doing this within the first year of being graduated from high school, then I'll go to a college. That's kind of what we decided on as I was about halfway through my senior year, I think. And luckily, not long afterwards, that's when I actually was like, okay, I gotta start trying to get work. I already wanted to get work, but I wasn't sure if I was really good enough, but I really wanted to like prove myself. And I really wanted to show that I could make money doing this stuff. I think it was March or April of 2012, when I was a senior, is when I got my first freelance assignment. I think to some people that sounds impressive, but just for context, that's after I posted like every week for almost 6 months in one forum post to bump. And I would bump it. Maybe I didn't bump it every week, but I'd bump it every time I had a new portfolio thing. And maybe it was like bi-weekly. And finally, that was my first like break, I guess, and I was asked by a very small company that makes or commissions stock art from artists for various like tabletop RPGs or board games or whatever. And they paid me a whopping $25 to draw some creatures for them. But that $25 was huge. I'd never worked any other job. I never made money any other way, other than like an allowance from my parents. And that definitely like made up for it. And then later that year, I ended up getting a few other things. So I remember this was another freelance assignment that I ended up getting. This was for a smaller client also working on like a tabletop RPG. And again, just posting in every forum possible, trying to get as much work as possible, trying to slowly increase my rates. So I think I ended up getting paid somewhere around like $50 for this illustration. So now that I was starting to graduate, I had like nothing but time on my hands. It basically was just me drawing / painting, hanging out with my girlfriend, now my wife, who actually ended up moving into my parents' place, and so it made it a lot easier for us to hang out, or I was sleeping. It really was very, very consistently, almost every day, was a minimum of 6 hours of drawing or painting, but closer to probably 8, and a maximum of like 12 to 14. This is a collection of like all the stock art I ended up doing for that first client that I had. So yeah, I got paid to about $25 for each one of these. And at this point, some of my goals had started to shift a little bit because obviously like I needed to make money and make money quicker. My goals kind of moved away from becoming a creature concept artist for Blizzard, because now I learned a little bit more about the industry. I learned like creature concept artist is like such a specific thing that it's probably not really a position. Most companies like you to be a little bit more generalized. They like you to have more skills than just that one particular thing. So the goal was always still work at Blizzard at some point. But also on top of that, I really wanted to be an artist for Magic the Gathering. That's what got me into this thing in the first place. And so pretty much every year I was always pushing more stuff, trying to get hired, by Magic the Gathering or by a Pathfinder. Pathfinder was another big client I kept trying to work for. I think the most I ended up getting paid this year from a single commission was like $75, if that. As a quick side note, let this be a lesson. I did probably over 2,000 gestures/figure drawings this year. I don't think I got any better at doing figures or gestures by doing this. It is so much more important to think about what it is you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to learn. It will not benefit you just copying things. It's going to get you much better at copying things. And again, like you might get an eye for something that like looks off, but you're not really able to figure out why it looks off and why, how you're going to fix it. Yeah, and you can see this is kind of a big dump of my, this was a big, like culmination of my portfolio that year. So I remember this was actually featured on the Imagine Effects CD that you got with the magazine. So it wasn't in the magazine, but I was so happy. I was so excited because it was the first time that like any sort of a major art organization had like acknowledged my work that I was doing. Yeah, this was for I think this was like a teen challenge on conceptart.org because I was technically still a teen. This was, WoW TCG wannabe work. This is so fun. I loved this though. Yeah, this was like, I don't remember how I came up with the idea. I feel like someone like gave me the idea for this image. And it was just like to create a spell card for Magic because I didn't really have anything in my portfolio that like felt like a spell card in that way. I remember being really quick and rough with these pieces though. Like they were technically portfolio pieces, but I remember them really, they didn't actually take me that long. Like I remember thinking they took me a long time. But when I really think back on what I was doing when working on images at this time, I wasn't actually thinking about certain things. It was like noodling and like guessing a lot of the time. And so something might take like 2 to 3 times longer because I would just keep like repainting this nostril over and over again because I was like, why does his nose look weird? And I like didn't understand. And it's because I don't know nose structure, right? Like I don't understand foreshortening or perspective. I don't understand anatomy in this way. Yeah, this image was like the perfect example of that. I remember working on this image so much and it was just like painting and repainting and painting and repainting. It was just her face over and over and over and over again because I just couldn't get it right. And you could tell that obviously her face is where I put all the attention because everything else is just super loose and super rough. And I like didn't understand how to make something look appropriately rough or painted while having the focus be someplace else. So this is now getting into 2013. So I would have been graduated from high school for at least 6 months at the start of the year. And I started getting work from higher end clients. So this is actually like possibly my first like real big official company work. This was for Alderac Entertainment, who's made quite a few board games. And I remember this piece, I think, was like, oh man, I was so happy about this image. I wanted to post it so bad, but it was like the first NDA that I'd ever had, and I just didn't even know when I could post it. So here you can really start to see that I'm starting to take some things seriously. I think this was closer to the second half of 2013, but what I ended up doing is I ended up just getting really, really frustrated with not understanding anatomy. And I took a note from Alex Negria, who is a really, really great artist, who was in the Crimson Daggers at the time that I was. Alex was kind of sharing some of his process for how he studies. And one of the things that he started doing is he was taking notes. And this was like groundbreaking for me. I was like, wait, you write stuff after drawing it? Why would you do that? And so I still didn't even understand why you do that, but I gave it a shot. So what I did is I started copying from, all of this, I believe this is from Bern Hogarth's book, if I'm not mistaken. And I just started writing notes. I didn't really understand what I was writing. I was just writing stuff down, whatever came to mind, right? And so like I'd write stuff like, you can barely read it, but like, oh, this is flat and then it widens and then it slants and like little things like that, right? Or like trying to color like muscles and figure out like maybe what muscle groups there are, trying to see like repeated patterns or like starting to build structure. So even if I wasn't totally understanding what I was copying, I was looking for patterns, which is a really, really important part of doing this and trying to get into this. I think writing notes and trying to be able to put visuals into words to be able to explain it, that was one of the greatest developments that I had in my artistic development. And I started participating in more online challenges. So Crimson Daggers started this blood sport challenge. So what the blood sport challenge was is basically you're given a specific task. It's not just a portfolio piece with like a theme of like draw an eagle person or whatever. It's more like draw, I think the first one maybe was like draw an action figure packaging art. And then there was one that was basically like Legend of the Cryptids at the time was like one of the most popular like mobile games, but also like popular jobs for fantasy illustrators. And so one was, yeah, like, you know, make your own version of like Legend of the Cryptids cards or something. So they'd have a normal version and then their advanced upgraded version. So that was cool. But on top of that, Dave and Dan were the two that ran it, and they did a really good job of trying to facilitate development as part of the challenge. So it wasn't just, oh, you're a better artist, so you made a better piece. Like, way to go, you did it. If you showed major strides in development, that was considered in the final. And so studying and how you studied or what you studied and what you put into the image was also just as important as the image itself, as well as the delivery of the image. So at the time, I had participated in one of them, and it was the action figure packaging, and I didn't do super well. And I realized after submitting it and seeing them talk about it and stuff that I did not actually really apply what I was learning. So this new one came around, and it was the Legend of the Cryptids like challenge, but it was with the title Beast Wars. So, you know, a warrior that turns into a beast or something. And I was like, this is it. I'm going all in. So I remember I like actually did concepts for this one. What an amazing idea of actually trying to do concept art to figure out what the character is going to look like. And you can see these were all the studies that I ended up doing for this piece. So I ended up doing a little bit of concept stuff for the main character and then concept for the advanced one. And I actually did thumbnails. I didn't do thumbnails like ever. I think this might have been my first time ever doing thumbnails of an image and really practicing. Again, didn't really know what I was looking for. I don't really know what makes for a great composition. But I did a few options anyway, found some things that I thought were cool. And then I just studied everything. What I did is I wrote down on a little piece of paper, like every single thing that I could think of that would be in this image. So I was like, okay, he's got metal armor, he's got a cloak, he's got a hood, it's raining, there's thunder, there's, for the eagle guy, he's got an eagle head, there's feathers, there's talons. And I just then tried to do studies of every single thing that I could. And so there's like the cape billowing, and there's like all these eagle studies to try and get the anatomy right and the wings right. I like painted an eagle head out of metal because I wasn't even sure if I was going to use that, but I was like, maybe I saw this, it's cool, I'm going to do it. I painted clouds because I knew I was going to have to paint clouds at some point. I did figure studies. I did like rain motion studies, you know, to see how someone might move through rain. Like, I did everything I possibly could. And you can see here are the final images that I ended up turning in. I also ended up doing my own sort of like mock-up UI as if it were in a game already. And so you can see how I'm applying all of those things. You know, I ended up doing a big metal bird head. I ended up having the metal armor in there, the cape billowing. Whether it's actually that great or not is besides the point. The like rain splashing thing, the clouds, like this whole image was such a huge development for me. And it was all because not only did I start taking notes with all of the studies that I was doing, but I was very deliberately trying to set out and learn a specific thing. It wasn't just, oh, I'm going to draw 1,000 figures to draw 1,000 figures. I had to start drawing because I was like, I'm drawing a bird person. I need to know how to draw birds. And it's not just copying that one bird from that one point of view, because my bird is from this point of view. And like, I could find specific reference, but it's never going to be that correct. It's never going to be perfect for the image that I'm making. In fact, that was such a huge development that I ended up looking back at my old images, and I did this image the previous year in 2012, around October. So within 5 months, I found these two images that like were pretty similar in their content, and you can really see just how much I developed in a short span of time. Now, consider how much I actually really developed from 2010 to 2012. And that was with a lot of noodling. It's a lot of guessing, a lot of wondering what to work on or thinking I'm developing because I'm just kind of doing stuff. And within 5 months, I started taking some time to deliberately plan out my images, plan out what I need to improve on, and the results speak for themselves. So now we're getting into 2014. And you might be wondering, okay, whatever happened to the deal that you had with your parents? So what ended up happening, and why are my parents okay with me now staying at home? Well, one, I wasn't making full-time or even part-time wages at that point, but they did see that I was starting to make more money. I was lucky if I got maybe $200 to $300 a month, if that. But they did see that it was, it's more than what it was previously. But on top of that, my stepdad at home started actually developing seizures. So what kind of ended up happening is they needed me and my wife to actually stay there in order for me to help drive him around places because he couldn't legally drive anymore. So now the deal kind of became, okay, we move out when we can, but whenever my stepdad needs to be driven around, I'm there to drive him around. So this is now about 2 years after graduating high school. And you can see I'm starting to take studies a lot more seriously. So this is just an example of, I don't even think I was working on a portfolio piece. I just kind of had an idea in my head for a painting, and I wanted to try and, learn something. So I was watching Game of Thrones at the time, and I really loved a lot of the like armor on people. I loved a lot of the shots of that. And so I just started writing a bunch of notes as I was painting. And again, like some of these notes don't totally make a lot of sense. It's a lot of guessing still, but I'm still trying to do that thing of like recognize patterns and be able to recreate them. And this is the result of those studies. And so you can see I never ended up finishing this and turning it into a full portfolio piece, but you can see like where I learned everything that I learned from that image and how I was able to apply it. And this is also the year that I started really going all in on anatomy studies. I got Michael Hampton's anatomy book, and I think it pretty much changed my life. And now it's the anatomy book that I recommend everyone get, even beginners. And what I ended up doing is just, I made these huge Photoshop files. I mean, they were like, I don't know, like up to 10,000 pixels or whatever. And I'd start at the top, and I would just start going through the book, and I'd start drawing everything, and I would take notes with everything. And what this ended up having me do actually is it improved my drawing skills within Photoshop. Because up to this point, I had drawn things in Photoshop, but I felt like my line work was always like super sloppy, or I always had to like redo lines and stuff all the time. And so having to like actually work on studies and recreate things in a particular shape and stuff really improved my line efficiency and helped out a lot. But I just started taking tons of notes, so many notes. And I'd even like on occasion just add my own stuff in there, right? So like, I don't think, not all the notes are just like copying things from the book. I would add in little tiny extra notes for myself to try and remember. You can see these are a few thumbnails that I made for a challenge that was on ImagineFX's forum. And compared to like my previous thumbnails, you can see just how different they are. Like there's a lot more detail. I'm thinking a lot more about lighting, about the camera angle and stuff like that. So there's still a lot of things that I think I'm like kind of being sloppy about. I'm not really actually thinking about some things. I think I just kind of wanted to make these thumbnails maybe a little fancier, but like at least I'm putting in the effort to start planning out lighting in certain ways. And you can see the final results of those thumbnails here. I also started really getting into still life painting this year. I had my little desk that was set up kind of in my parents' basement, and I just started setting things down and painting them. Again, this is like one of those things where I wasn't really understanding why I should be doing this. I saw a lot of other artists doing it, and I saw their art get better, and so I was like, okay, I should be doing this too. So I just kind of started without really much planning. And you can see here, I started experimenting with like actually including photos into my work. I feel like this is like fine. I think it's a bit of a trap though, doing it too early, because I think I was just pretty impressed with like the detail that I got in there. I didn't have to paint this thing now because it was there. That detail was there and it looks like way cooler, way quicker, and way easier. I also didn't have to think about as many things about like design or like where certain things go. I just use photos a lot differently nowadays when I work on things, but I kind of use them as like an alternative to trying to render something, because if I wanted something to be photorealistic, it was just easier just directly using a photo. And at this time, I think it's because I was really looking at a lot of Brad Rigney's work, and I started seeing how he was using photos in his work and just really wanted to emulate that. And you can see, like, as I'm scrolling through here, there's just so many more studies of things with lots of notes. Like, these are all drapery studies that I'm doing. Lots and lots of notes. Trying to understand things. I did this dog study back in like 2010, but I kind of recreated it and painted it. But you can see this time, I'm actually trying to break down the structure of the dog's anatomy and like starting to kind of understand, why you might want to do something like that. 2014 is also the year that I made my first YouTube video, so you can actually go and watch that. I made a whole video about studying and how to improve, and now, 10 years later, I can go and I'm literally telling you the same thing of like, yeah, this is how I improved. I improved by sitting down, figuring out what it is that I was going to draw, what's going to be a part of that drawing, what I'm going to need to learn or try to improve and get better at, and I'm going to try and study and figure it out. I think I learned a little bit more about how to dissect studies since then. A lot of this was kind of floundering around and like not totally being sure of what I'm studying. It was kind of broad, right? It was just like, oh, I need to paint blonde hair. How do you paint blonde hair? But I wasn't really thinking of things in separate terms, right? Now I'd think of it more as like, okay, hair. How do you paint hair, right? And how does it connect into the head? What's the major shapes of it? How does it flow? What kind of different hair types or styles are there? And then I could start to consider like, oh, okay, how does hair like layer, right? And then how do the colors sort of react within that? And it would be a little bit more precise with how I'd actually be thinking about these things. And you can see like this image is a good example of what I mean when using photos. Is like I started using photos and it did kind of like force me to try and paint a little bit more photorealistic. But the problem is all the photos end up standing out a lot more because I'm not able to paint things and bring them up to that same level of realism. And on top of that, it's just kind of hiding the things that I'm not understanding. I don't really know how to paint grass. I don't really know how to, draw trees. And so instead of actually taking the time to study and learn that stuff, I just kind of was getting more focused on the final result in this case. Yeah, this was also the year that I made this illustration. And ended up finding out a few years later that it's apparently used as like a meme. 2014 was probably the most prolific year that I had as an artist, if I'm not mistaken. And in fact, this is all of the work that I did in 2014. And 2014 was also the year that I ended up getting hired at my first studio. My friend Brandon Leach, who also is a great artist, makes lots of toys. You should check him out. Him and I had been talking online for the last couple of years, and he'd just given me a lot of feedback and advice and stuff, and kind of helped me get better and see what I needed to work on to improve. He got hired at a studio called Super Genius, and when they ended up needing to hire on some extra hands, he thought of me and recommended me. Prior to working at Super Genius, I think the most that I made in a month was maybe $1,000. And that $1,000 was actually working on this book cover here. I think it was maybe like $750 for the book cover. And then I had like another assignment that month or something to work on. But I remember looking at it and being like, wow, like $1,000 that month. It was such a huge milestone for me. And then when I got hired at Super Genius, I think at that point I was making like $2,600 a month, and I didn't even know what to do with myself. I I was so relieved. I was so happy. And it was the first time that I was able to kind of show my parents, like, yeah, look, like this is possible. Like I can make money. I'm working at a studio. Now, I was a contractor. I wasn't hired full time, and they knew that. But it was the first instance that they saw that I actually was kind of getting somewhere here with the industry. And I think at that point, my parents weren't really concerned anymore about whether or not I was actually going to be able to do this. Moving into 2015, so since I started working at a studio, I worked at Super Genius for I think about 8 months straight. And when I started working for them, like so much of my anxiety and fears just kind of like drifted off. I had already been like kind of close to quitting and like, or at least debating, like, is all this worth it? Am I going to get anywhere? Multiple times that had happened. And so getting that news and that offer was like such a huge relief. But I also knew it was kind of a ticking clock. You know, I knew that they only needed me for a certain amount of months, and then that was it. And so I kind of took that time to just kind of relax. Though I didn't work as much in my spare time. I knew day one of going there that like it's not what I wanted to do. You can actually see here, these are examples of the stuff that I was working on. This planet here on the right was the first assignment I ever did for Super Genius. I was tasked with painting it. I think they said I had like 2 days to paint it, and I was like, I'm gonna paint it in one. I'm gonna show them like I can do this. I really wanted to like show them that I was able to put in the effort and that I was able to do the work and stuff. I think it ended up needing to be painted over, but that's fine. A lot of this was for Disney Academy, I guess. It was like a small mobile game for Disney, and it was a lot of work. It was like 8 months of work that we worked on all these planets and these docks and like pins. There's all these like achievement pins, so we just did so many of them. And like I loved my time there. I loved working with all my coworkers. I really enjoyed it, but I also just knew that like this work wasn't the type of work that I really wanted to keep doing. I did want to eventually still work for Magic, but it's hard because, I would go and I'd work at that job for, 8 hours, and then I had to drive about 45 minutes or so home, sometimes an hour, depending on traffic. And, it's hard to get in that extra time to expand your portfolio. And so I remember I kind of painted here and there still. I would kind of doodle, and it was a lot of stuff like this just to kind of remind myself that I like knew how to paint something still. That wasn't just a Disney cartoon planet. But about 6 months into working there was finally when I kind of snapped out of it. I realized like time was running out. I had to, they weren't going to keep me on for forever. I'm not making full-time money at this point. I couldn't really take on other freelance except for a couple assignments here and there because I was working with them. And so I started focusing on my portfolio. This was the first image that I did for my new portfolio. This was after not really painting for myself for about 6 months or so. This image ended up doing really, really well online, and I think was like, again, it was like a major kind of milestone, I feel like, in the validation of my peers. It didn't really get me any sort of work or anything like that, but it got my work seen by a lot more people within the industry. And they saw my development, and they were like, oh, okay, like this, you're getting better, you're going someplace. And these were a lot of the images that I was doing around this time. I was doing a lot of like RPG characters, stuff like this. My anatomy is still garbage, but I can paint stuff really, really well. And so I can make something look really good and really realistic, even if I don't totally understand what's happening underneath it all. And really, that's enough to get you by for a long, long time. But 2015 ends, and I'm not brought on for maybe another couple months, and I think they maybe fit me onto another project for about a month, but it wasn't consistent. And I knew that the only way for me to actually move out and have work full time on this stuff was to have more consistent income. Come 2016. And a few things happened. Basically, I was starting to see success. A lot of my peers were saying that I was better, getting better. I obviously was able to work at a studio for a long point of time. And my wife at the time was like, just ask for work. Like, you can, at this point, like, there's no reason that you're not good enough. I was nervous, but I basically just sent out a big thing online saying like, hey, I'm looking for work. Here's my portfolio. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, my schedule was full. I ended up getting reached out to by Pathfinder, which was like a huge client at the time. It was one that I wanted to work for a really, really long time. I ended up getting reached out to by a couple like smaller clients that it didn't pay as well, but it was fine. But at that point, I then was able to consistently off my own freelance make at least, $1,000 to $2,000 a month, probably closer to, the low end of 1,000. And so my wife and I started looking for an apartment, and within 2 to 3 months after that, we ended up moving out, and I started working full time. And let me tell you, working full time when you barely make anything is awful. It was actually legitimately the worst experience of my career. The beginnings of my full-time freelance career were the worst. Part of that is because I didn't plan well enough. We didn't have very much money saved up. But on top of that, it was just because I had to take on every bit of work that I could. So these were images that were the first ones that were given to me by Pathfinder. And I knew like these, I had to hit it out of the park. I had to do so good that they wanted to give me as much work as possible. And luckily I got to work on these while I was still at my parents'. So I wasn't as pressured to try and get these out the door, but I did everything I could. I looked at every bit of Pathfinder art that I really, really liked, and I just tried to do really good. I wanted to try and show them like, look, I can put them in this environment and like add all this detail, and look, I'm getting all these little character touches in there and stuff. And look, the tentacles have all this detail. Like I just tried to show off my skills like as much as possible with these. I loved this one too. I thought this one was fun. And I mean, it ended up working. They ended up loving the work, and they immediately sent me more work within the next wave. The problem that ended up happening with Pathfinder though, is that they have a net 60 pay. And so I did this work and it was fine when I was at my parents because it's whatever, like I don't need the money right then. I don't have rent to pay. But then we moved out. And when we moved out, if Pathfinder was a consistent client, it meant that I wasn't going to get the money for every single Pathfinder thing that I did for another 2 months, which meant I had to fill my schedule as much as possible. And because I couldn't turn anything down, what I ended up doing just before we ended up moving out is Pathfinder came to me and they said, hey, we have a new project coming up. We have up to 15 illustrations. How many do you want? And I said, could I get all of them? They said, are you sure? It's a 45-day deadline. And I said, yeah, I need it. Like, give me, if possible, could I have all of them? And they said, sure. And so I had 45 days to get 15 illustrations done. I had 2 other clients at the time as well that I had to get illustrations done. And in the middle of those 45 days was when we were moving into our apartment. But I did it. I got every illustration out. I got all of the sketches done before we ended up moving out, and then I basically only had about 1.5 days per illustration to paint all of these. And so I did every trick I could think of to try and get this to go quicker. I used SketchUp, I used photos, I did whatever I possibly could to make this go faster. I had Blur to make sure that you don't need to have that much detail in there. And man, it was a lot. Every single day for about 3 to 4 months, because it didn't end after this. I didn't get paid for 2 months after working on this. So right as I'm finishing this up, I had to immediately get more work and hop onto something else. And so I basically ended up going from a schedule where I was drawing about, at least 8 to 10 hours a day because I was working at a studio and then, would do a little bit at home, to actually working 16 hours a day. I could not stop at all. Everything I ate was microwavable, so I could microwave it and then get back to work. I ended up buying 12 packs of Red Bull, and I did not really have energy drinks a lot at that time, but it was the only way for me to be able to stay awake in order for me to finish this. I do not recommend this at all. I also don't think this is actually totally necessary when living the freelance lifestyle by any means. I think with proper planning, you can avoid a lot of what I ended up having to go through with these. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is with my first assignments, because I had more time to work on them, I wanted to use them as portfolio pieces. I wanted to do so good, not only to impress the client, because I wanted to be proud when it came out, for me to be able to post it and show other people what I could do for their products and get hired elsewhere. The problem is that because all these were so rushed, none of these ended up feeling good enough to put into my portfolio. So I got a lot of money for it at the time, which was great, but there wasn't really much to show for it afterward. So that was a terrible experience. That lasted probably about maybe 6 months after we moved out. Luckily, after about 4 months of being moved out, where everything was hectic, I finally got brought on back to Super Genius for another quick assignment. So that was a little, comforting for another 1 to 2 months or so. But then finally, what ended up actually helping, and where I think most of my career ended up starting to lighten up, was I got brought on by Smite. The prior year in 2015, late 2015, I ended up applying for Smite, and I actually did fan art of Loki and Freya that I'll pull up on screen, and posted it on the Smite Reddit. And a lot of the Smite fans really liked it. It got shared around a bunch, and the art director at the time ended up seeing them, and he said that I was good. I could work on Smite stuff, but they just didn't have any availability at the moment. And so I kind of was always waiting to hear back from them and see if they'd ever have availability. And so 8 months later, they ended up reaching out to me in September of 2016, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to try and take on a card or an illustration?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely. Please give that to me." At this time, it was $800 for an illustration. Prior to that, the most I'd gotten paid for an illustration of a consistent type was Pathfinder's illustrations at $300. I'd been paid higher, but it was always for one-off illustrations. And so basically, I got myself, it was basically a raise of $500. I had to do more work for a Smite illustration, but it wasn't, 2.5 times the work. And so I made significantly more money when I started with Smite. Now, it didn't start smooth, all right? Look, this, for anyone that plays Smite or has seen the Smite Bologna Smite Rivals skin, that was my first skin that I worked on, and it was not a smooth experience. I found out very quickly that I actually don't know how to paint women. I don't know how to draw their faces, and it was not good. There was a lot of paint overs, there was a lot of feedback, and finally, it was after 10 or so back and forth rounds of feedback that we landed here. And I think it ended up turning out okay in the end, but it was a struggle to get there. And so I was nervous that they weren't going to hire me on again. Luckily, they hired me on again for some reason. I don't know. Why they hired me on again and gave me another female character, I also don't know. Because this one was the Amaterasu Smite World Championship skin. And it also did not go very smooth. There was a lot of struggles. It was very difficult getting the face and body right. And so this became an ongoing pursuit for me, basically, for the next year or two, is trying to get good enough where Smite doesn't paint over the women that I draw. Eventually, I think they just kind of stopped sending me women, which was probably understandable. For those that don't know, there's 4 hours of footage so far that I've recorded for this, so I can't get into every single thing leading up to my career. But that is the turning point. That's when things lightened up. I got work with Hi-Rez. Hi-Rez was a fantastic client and ended up giving me a consistent raise once every 6 months or so. So by the time that I stopped working with Hi-Rez or taking on work for them, it was because I got hired full-time at a different studio. I think I was making about $2,400 or so for every splash image for them, which was really, really good. Working for them allowed me the freedom to be able to spend more time on my portfolio. It meant that I wasn't working 16 hours a day, and I started working on my portfolio and redirecting it back towards trying to pursue Magic as a client. And after starting to build my portfolio up a little bit, I sent it out, and sure enough, got hired by Magic. Wow, wasn't that so useful, so resourceful? Listen to that guy talk. He could just talk for days about himself. Thank you, everybody that came back and watched another video by me, or if this is your first video that you saw, thank you for coming by and listening to me ramble about stuff. If you want to see me ramble about stuff and work on art and stuff like that, you can go and watch me on Twitch. I stream very sporadically, and there's no predictable time of being able to determine when I'm going to do it. So it just really keeps the viewers on their toes. Otherwise, it's like I said, I have other video ideas that I've been sitting on for literal years at this point, so I'm going to try and take the time to actually work on those things and get those out, and not worry about trying to make it as perfect as possible, which is what has stopped me in the past. So if you like this video, you feel free to like it, subscribe, DM me questions, ask questions in the comments, talk to me about whatever, ask me how my day has been. So far, it's been all right. I'm doing this. It's kind of a pain. I honestly, that's probably the type of stuff that I'd give back to you if you DM'd me about that. So, you know, if that interests you. I guess I could just set this here. I'll just walk out now. I'm just gonna leave. Bye. Bye. I'm not actually leaving. I'm just kind of walking behind the camera until I decide now it's a good time to end the video.